In today's video, we're going to continue our NHL Season Preview series, and today we're covering the New York Islanders, and that's coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So as I mentioned off the top here, today we're doing a season preview video here for the New York Islanders. Now if this is your first time watching one of our season previews, we're going to break this down into 4 segments. The first segment, we're going to do a 17-18 season recap and really take a deep dive into their team stats and analyze how they did. The second segment is called Additions and Subtractions, where we really analyze the roster of last year's team compared to this year and see all the differences. The third segment, we're going to do a projected lineup for opening night and project who we think will be on the ice for the Islanders in that first game. The last segment will be the predictions and projections for the Islanders and how they will do for the upcoming 18-19 season. So let's jump in here with the 17-18 season recap. Now, as we know, the New York Islanders did not have a fantastic 17-18 season. They finished with a record of 35-37-10 for 80 points, for 7th best in the Metropolitan Division, yet again missing the Stanley Cup playoffs. Even though the New York Islanders were a very offensive team, they were even worse defensively and still managed to give up way more goals than they scored last year. They scored 261 goals last year for 7th best in the NHL, which is absolutely tremendous, really. If you think about the number of goals that all these other teams scored, they were one of the more offensive teams. If they could have only kept the puck out more, and really, you can't blame the goaltenders for all of that. There's a lot of it's their decor as well as their overall team defense here. But as a team, they managed to be the absolute worst in the league for goals against. They managed to give up 293 goals last year for a minus 32 goal differential. So as many goals as they scored, they still managed to give up 32 more goals. That is quite the accomplishment, and I mean that sarcastically. Obviously, the New York Islanders were terrible defensively and in net last year. It's a shame that they had all that offensive power, but it really didn't accomplish a whole heck of a lot. Now, like their goals for, their power play was actually pretty strong. They finished the power play with a 23.2 success rate for 6th best in the NHL. Really, how can you score that many goals, have that strong of a power play, but yet manage to give up that much and still lose that many games? It's really quite mind-boggling how you can be such a yin and a yang at different ends of the ice here. The New York Islanders on the penalty kill were, again, the league's worst, finishing with a low percentage of 73.2. So obviously having weak goaltending, weak team defense, something like penalty killing, you can't really expect to be really all that much better considering what goes into killing the penalties here. So last year was obviously a very offensively gifted team with a very terrible defensive team. Unfortunately, that does not bode well for good results. New York Islanders scored the first goal last year. They managed to have a record of 23-10-5. So that might sound like a good record, but really, that's not all that fantastic. If you think about it, that's 23 times they hung on for the win, and 15 times they either lost in regulation or overtime. So even though it's not terrible, it's certainly not a great result either. One bright spot for the New York Islanders last year was their record after having a lead going into the third period. When they had a lead after 40 minutes to play, they had a record of 25-2-2. So overall, not too many blown leads, but unfortunately, they didn't go into too many third periods with the lead. But when they did manage to close out the bulk of those games. Now let's take a look here at their scoring breakdown by period to see if we can really see any glaring trends here in their period-by-period breakdown. In the first period of play, they were outscored by their opponents 87-73 for a minus 14 differential. Obviously, more often than not, they ended the first period either tied or down, which is not a great start to most nights. The second periods were even worse, being outscored by their opponents 108-86. So obviously, second periods were even worse than the first periods and seemed to be their Achilles heel here. Obviously, a lot of times after one, they still had the game within reach, but usually within that second period, it got too far out of hand. Obviously, the Islanders, when they did win, even the games the Islanders did win last year was a bit of a track meet. When you're looking at a lot of scores of 5-4, 6-5, 7-6, that type of thing. It's really an unfortunate thing that the Islanders couldn't improve their overall team defense last year. Now, third periods actually weren't too bad. They actually outscored their opponents 95-91 for a +4 differential. So obviously, as the game went on, the Islanders seemed to get better. And just more often than not, they were down by too many goals and just couldn't make a go of the comeback. Now let's jump over here into our additions and subtraction segment. Now, as we know, the New York Islanders have gone through a lot of drastic changes. This 2018 offseason could be franchise altering. Let's obviously start here with the subtractions. I don't need to remind you, if you're an Islanders fan, that obviously star center iceman John Tavares is no longer a member of the Islanders who walked through free agency and signed with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Obviously, that is going to be a huge blow for this team, and at this point in time, it's really unclear how his offensive production will be replaced in this lineup. John Tavares wasn't the only player to leave town last year. There was more who left via free agency, including defenseman Calvin DeHaan. DeHaan is a pretty solid two-way defender, more known for his in-zone play in the D-zone, and he actually walked through free agency and signed with the Carolina Hurricanes as well. Now, they did have some other guys leave town, like goaltender Jaro Halak, who wasn't offered a new contract. Same thing with defenseman Brandon Davidson. They also did not re-up forward Shane Prince, who's now gone over to play in Europe, as well as forward Nikolai Kulemin, who spent a lot of time on injury reserve. His contract's finally expired, and obviously he was not re-signed either. Veteran defenseman Dennis Seidenberg was also not technically offered a new contract, but he is in camp with the Islanders on a professional tryout, and at this point in time, they have not announced if they're going to be signing him or releasing him from the PTO, so it is possible Seidenberg could be back, but technically I suppose he is a subtraction unless he is signed. Now let's take a look at what they've added during this past offseason as well. So the key additions were not even on the ice. Obviously, they had Lou Lamoriello come in first as president of hockey operations and absolutely cleaned house, moving Garth Snow and head coach Doug Weight out of their positions. He then brought in Stanley Cup winning coach Barry Trotz to be the new head coach, and he also named himself to be the general manager. Obviously, having a new duo here at the helm with Lamoriello and Trotz, that should go a long way to helping move this team forward. But they can only do so much with the roster they have. It will certainly take some time for them to be able to leave their mark on this team. Even though Lou Lamoriello certainly does have a very strong past history here of being a great general manager in the NHL, in my opinion, he did make some questionable signings this offseason, especially the contract he gave to Leo Komarov, and then of course he also brought in veteran forward Valtteri Filppula as well. He also managed to make a trade with the Maple Leafs, obviously his old team, and brought back Matt Martin to the New York Islanders, was again another questionable call. He just helped take another contract off the Leafs books as well, and really I'm not sure Martin's really going to play a whole lot of a role with the Islanders. Obviously, at one point, Martin was a very popular player with the Islanders organization, and I can see maybe under some circumstances potentially bringing him back, but that move seemed puzzling to me as well. They also signed a player outside of the NHL, Jan Kovar, who is battling for a roster spot and very well could play on the Islanders' fourth line. Now, the other main addition they brought in was goaltender Robin Lehner from the Buffalo Sabres. Obviously, we talked about Lehner here before, where he's gone through some personal struggles here in the past couple of years and had an article released here in the last few weeks revealing a lot of what he went through. And for the first time, Robin Lehner appears to be healthy and clean and sober and ready to really play hockey and make a difference here in his NHL career. So hopefully he can be the goaltender that the New York Islanders need him to be and what his potential has shown here for many years. So hopefully he can help move that team forward in the goaltending situation at least. Now, as far as some rookies that could make some impacts here, they do have many, but it looks as though most of them are going to be starting the season in the American Hockey League. They recently announced some of their players be demoted to the American Hockey League, including Josh Hosang, Michael Del Cole, Keiffer Bellows, as well as Sebastien Aho. Obviously, all of those guys I thought potentially could rival for a spot, especially Aho and potentially Keiffer Bellows as well. I think Bellows probably has the strongest potential out of the three forwards I mentioned, and Aho did look pretty decent when he played with the Islanders last season. So obviously I fully suspect he'll be a call-up option here as they need defensemen throughout the year. Now, of course, at the last minute here as I record this video, the Islanders also did sign Lucas Pisa, so I can mention him here also as an addition, and likely will get some playing time here on the blue line. Let's take a look here at your starting projected lineup for opening night on the New York Islanders roster. Your two goaltenders are definitely going to be Robin Lehner and Thomas Greiss. It's not quite totally clear yet who will be the starter. If I had to guess, I'd probably say Robin Lehner, but at this point, it's not totally clear what direction the Islanders intend to go with their goaltending duo. Your top two defensemen are Nick Leddy and Johnny Boychuk. Hopefully, Boychuk can have a healthier year and not miss so much time. He's certainly a key member of that blue line and was injured a lot last season. You're probably also going to see Ryan Pulock play with Pelech as well. Your third pair very well could be Thomas Hickey and Scott Mayfield, and of course the newly signed Lucas Pisa as well. It's hard to say where they all fit. Now they also have a young defenseman, like I mentioned, in Sebastien Aho, as well as Devin Taves, who could see some playing time this year as well. So they certainly have enough defensemen, so I was a little bit surprised that they signed Lucas Pisa. They said in a press release they wanted to create a little bit more competition within the blue line group, and adding a veteran like Pisa with about 500 NHL games under his belt would certainly help with that and certainly make things a little bit more competitive back there. So we'll see how that goes, but that's likely your decor for opening night. Within the forward group, I would imagine the top line obviously has to be Matt Barzal, Anthony Beauvillier, and Jordan Eberle. Now, they could shake that up a little bit, but those three played really well together last year. So for me, I'd probably leave them alone, but we could see some potential changes here to kind of balance out the lines. You very well could see Brock Nelson end up playing with Josh Bailey and Anders Lee. So obviously those two guys spent a lot of time playing with Tavares in the past. So can Brock Nelson step up and really up his game to really see if he can make that line just as effective. Obviously, Nelson's on a 1-year deal, so it's kind of a prove-it-to-me contract where he needs to kind of see what he can do to extend his future with the club and see how productive that Brock Nelson can be for the New York Islanders. Obviously, Brock Nelson is certainly a step down from John Tavares, so we'll see how those two wingers can perform. Obviously, when you're used to playing with a top high-end center, it's always curious to see how you perform with different line mates should there be a change in the lineup or you move on from that team. So I'll certainly be watching Anders Lee and Josh Bailey closely this year to see how their production keeps up without JT in the lineup. Now, your third line likely is a group of veterans like Valtteri Filppula, Leo Komarov, and Andrew Ladd. Obviously, we'll see if they can hopefully all stay healthy and be productive this year. And that's more than likely going to be your third line. In my opinion, there's 4 different guys who could make up the fourth line. So obviously, one of them will end up being the extra 13th forward here. But obviously, you got Casey Cizikas, you've got Tom Kuhnackel, you get the newly signed Jan Kovar, as well as veteran Cal Clutterbuck. So obviously, it's not quite clear exactly who's all going to play on that line. But within those 4 guys, I expect 3 of them to make up the fourth line and 1 to be the extra forward. So that is my projected lineup for the New York Islanders here on opening night. Now let's jump over here to the final segment where I give you my thoughts and predictions for how this team will do this year. Unfortunately, I think the New York Islanders are in for a very, very tough season. Life without John Tavares is not going to be easy, where they really haven't done a whole heck of a lot to replace him. Obviously, that's not an easy task to do and could take some time. Now, obviously, youngster Matthew Barzal has the potential to be a franchise top center iceman as well, but he's going to be going into his sophomore season, and without having that insulation of John Tavares in front of him in the lineup, he is going to be seeing more of the top defensive forwards and top pair defensemen when he's on the ice. That very well could impact his production as well. So will we see Matt Barzal potentially take a step back on his offensive production during the 18-19 season? For Islanders fans, I certainly hope not, but I do think it's quite a possibility. I do think adding Robin Lehner in goal certainly is a bit of an upgrade. Hopefully Thomas Greiss can bounce back and play better as well. But really, last year the goaltenders were seeing way too many grade A opportunities. So overall, they need better team defense from the forward group and the D-core. And really, where there hasn't been too many significant changes on the back end, I'm not really sure that's a possibility really for the Islanders this year. So I do think the goaltenders are going to be in tough and still be facing a ton of rubber during the 18-19 season. Because of all that, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of faith in the New York Islanders to win a lot of hockey games this year, and I do have them projected to be 8th in the Metropolitan Division. Obviously, maybe finishing low in the standings will allow them to have a nice high draft pick and a really strong 2019 NHL draft. Obviously, having a top pick in the draft would go a long way to helping to really move forward and get somebody in that lineup to replace the production of a John Tavares. So those are my thoughts on the New York Islanders for the upcoming 18-19 season. I'd love to hear what yours are. What do you think the Islanders can accomplish this year without John Tavares? And how do you see this team moving forward without their star captain in the lineup? If you're new to the channel here, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there is plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So if you're new, hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We will catch you next time.